as we head into Tol Dagor right now. Both teams right out the get-go getting over to the Sand Queen, the first boss of the dungeon, which you do need to kill, of course, in order to access the floors of the prison. Sand Queen going in right now. Bloodlust has been popped here for Method EU. Now, the only kind of detrimental affix that we have, even for the cannons, Nagur, we know, is that explosive.
Yeah, so the explosive affix is something they have to deal with, of course. Now, with double rogue, it should not be a really big deal because rogues are just so good to dealing with them. Not only that, but they can also cleave off of the explosive, therefore not losing a lot of damage at all from switching to them. So definitely good to have those double rogue setups here. And as you mentioned, just both teams popping the Bloodlust here from on the Sand Queen and just pulling more trash on top of it, which is something we've seen all the time in the cat play as well.
And, you know, we have the Fortified here already making the dungeon substantially easier for the teams because of the cannons coming up that we'll see after Jess Howless, the second boss of the dungeon. But on top of it, you have Skittish, which is just really a non-affix. It does decrease the tank's threat done, but threat is a multiplier based on damage done. We know how much damage the Prot Warriors can output. Not even that, but both teams are carrying double Rogue right now, so no concern. These teams should be able to absolutely fly through this dungeon right now, as Method EU has hit 40% on the Sand Queen. Black Mamba, once again, we have seen their single target DPS a bit slower than Method EU in the previous dungeon, is now sitting at 45% on Sand Queen.
Yeah, Method EU definitely showing that they can do a lot of single target damage as the boss is on the second or third upheaval here, and the Sand Queen is already on 28%, so about to go down. They also pulled some of the parasites through the cage here, so just making everything a little bit faster, both on 5%. Now we've seen some teams pull a lot more trash on top of the Sand Queen here. Some teams even running mages, but Method EU and Black Mamba not doing any of that. They just killed the parasites to make sure they don't have to deal with it after the Sand Queen is dead, and then they're gonna move on.
Certainly don't want those irritating you. Method EU about to down the Sand Queen here. No more upheaval phase. Of course, that upheaval goes down and does do a massive amount of nature damage onto the target. If it's the tank as well, she will melee as she comes up, so particularly saucy on the tank should they get the hit. But no problem for Method EU right now, as the rogues, of course, bust into the bottom area of the dungeon right now, grabbing the thugs, double thug, of course, moving up here, and we are in the teaming environment. I don't know why I mentioned Skittish earlier. Those icons, I was confused, but we are in teaming here, so there's a double thug in the bottom pack here. They move right up. They are ready to mass stealth everything off and move past with the double sap. Of course, that true CC, as we see one last bump here from Mears with that Ring of Peace. Black Mamba following suit and only now running up in the dungeon, but they're taking it a bit slower. Now, Nagur, on this pull, we've actually seen a lot of teams kind of pull the thugs to the side and then run up, but it seems that they're just full on heading up.
Yeah, one thing to note as well here that here's some of the cages they can open if you're a rogue. You open the cages and you get buffs. Now the buffs are randomly located, and the rogues usually only open the right side because it takes too much time to go to the left, and someone might die, get aggro. So that's why it's very important which buffs you get from the right side. If you get the attack power, then you're going to be so much faster because, of course, attack power is the one thing you want with those full melee setups. Now, I've talked to Marius, and he said when they get the attack buff, the attack power buff, they can do the 11 minutes. If they don't get it, they're going to be slower. So let's hope both of those teams get the good RNG.
Well, you're going to be the one to blame, certainly, if they don't get that 11 minutes and not Method EU, as they do line of sight here away from those speakers, of course, wanting to make sure that none of those Salt Blasts are hitting the tank too hard. They do a fair bit of damage, especially in this Fortified environment. Fortified generally easier in this dungeon, but there is a lot of damage that can go on the tank. As we see, Wong just dipped so low right now. He has so many stacks of the torch toss from some of the mobs here in the jail, and they just stack up. No dispel available from the rest of Druid Envies as he finally does get the dispel on Wong. Wong peeks back in and starts cleaving down the targets as well. Of course, that teaming environment, I misspoke earlier, of course, we are teaming, not Skittish, just has more mobs present in the dungeon. And until they get access to the cannons upstairs, which will usually be somewhere between the mid-20s to even low 40s%, depending on the strategy, they do actually have to front deal with this trash before they get access to the cannons.
Yeah, so Method EU, of course, already on Jess Howless, they pulled the boss through the cage before. So they dealt with the first trash, then they pulled the boss through the cage, it ran all the way around towards them. They pushed him to 70%, he went back to open the cages, and while he went back, they pulled the Arsonist on top. They seated them a little bit in a corner with the Vortex. And then when the Vortex ran out, they pulled the rest of it. Now, if they kill some of those Arsonists, they are going to proc the 20% Reaping Wave. So they need to make sure to deal with that too. But there's so much going on in the second phase of Jess Howless fight. You need to interrupt the boss, you need to interrupt Bobby, and you have the Arsonist doing so much damage to the tank. And then you're also going to get the Reaping, so this is going to be difficult for Method EU, even on a non-tyrannical setup.
Yeah, certainly there are two separate interrupts that you need on Bobby with the Vicious Mauling and, of course, the Howling Fear, and on Jess himself as well with that Howling Fear, not to mention your constant constantly line of sighting for any orbs that may spawn down the hall. Here finally comes the first Reaping Wave for Method EU as they cleave it down on top of the boss. Jess Howless now 78% for Black Mamba as they have dealt with their Reaping. A bit more of a safer route. We know they tried to kill the Reaping before the stun on Jess Howless. Else when the stun happens that you see here on the right side of the screen, they can accrue too many of those Reaping stacks on the tank and you won't have that dispel available, so it will often give tanks. We saw that in some of the cup plays, so they're playing a bit safer, but you can't play too safe against a team like Method EU right now, who's just about to down the second boss, has already dealt with their first Reaping, and will be ready to head upstairs in just a moment, rounding as much trash as they can for the cannon.
Yeah, one thing to note as well is that the Rogues are playing Night Elves now. They used to play Dwarf in the dungeon before, 4 damage and together Rage to remove debuffs, but now they're also playing Night Elves. Usually you don't need the Shadow Mount as a Rogue because you have the Vanish, but in this dungeon specifically, there's so many things you need to get rid of either when you open the cages, when you are in the cannons, so just interesting to note that both of the Rogues are switching to Night Elves too, while Black Mamba already played Night Elf in the dungeon before. Now we're going to be in the cannon area. We're going to see Fragnance and Gingy both jumping into those cannons, making sure to deal with the trash, while the rest of the members are just really trying to line of sight the explosives.
Yeah, explosives are certainly going to be a bit disastrous here if they get too out of hand. Now, there's a bit of RNG with their spawn. You could have just many spawn, you could have none spawn. Depends where they spawn, how far down the hall, and you're not going to have the Rogues running right into the line of fire of the cannon. So while we see, of course, Gingy dealing with one side with the cannons, now has gone in and done a mass pull in the other room, getting everything in position. And now we're going to see a lot of crowd control coming in. Of course, there's that Ring of Peace. We're going to see an Ursul's Vertex coming in. Both have been placed down already, a bit close together, so some of the mobs are actually separated right now. We've had a bit of split between the two groups as we are getting some explosives, and we do know in the cannon you're not safe from the explosives either, so a lot of damage coming in right now, starting to get a bit out of hand as the team decides to dip out and head over to the far cannon. Gingy already present there, trying to keep the rest of the mobs at bay as Black Mamba has down Jess Howless and is heading upstairs as well.
Yeah, so when I talked to Method EU, I said, so isn't explosive pretty difficult in Tolagor to deal with, because if the people are in the cannon, they can still get damaged by it, and you can't really deal with them because you don't have any range. And they just thought, you know what, it's not a problem at all. The Rogues are just going to get out-healed, right? Because the Resto Druid heals, the Windwalker Monk off heals, and they do have cheat death in case something goes wrong. So they can just either or go out of the cannon and just cloak, so they just out-healing the explosive and just not killing them at all, while the rest of the members who are not Rogues, they just line of sight them around the corner. And
doing well to line of sight right now. A lot of the mobs on the screen right now are Reaping Waves, so they're not going to spawn those explosives. Most of the dangerous trash has actually already been dealt with for Method EU, so it was looking a bit dangerous there for a second, but they managed to get hold of the situation as Gingy's now started to work on the right side. Now, in this teaming environment, they still need about high 80s-ish% before moving on past the third boss and getting their 100% before the final boss. Korgus in the dungeon right now. Method has proc their fourth wave of Reaping that they will use the cannon to demolish as Black Mamba is doing their own mass pull. We see you here from Wong running in, grabbing everything, and line of sighting it around the corner, getting ready to do their own work.
Yeah, Method EU on 88% trash, so they don't have to do anything more other than the trash after this next boss, which is also going to be dealt with the cannon, so it's going to die very quickly. Now, they're Knight Captain Valyria. Now, the bosses here we've talked about a lot before because they can be very dangerous, especially the last boss on a tyrannical setting, but this time we have 45, so the bosses really shouldn't be a big problem. Not even the last boss should be a big deal for those teams, and especially Valyria doesn't really do that much as long as you deal with those barrels properly.
Yeah, it's looking a bit scary here for Black Mamba. We've already got Cheat Death proc there for Shin, one of the two rogues that is in the cannon. A lot of damage coming in on him right now as they finally get their third Reaping Wave spawning. Huge pull coming in from them as well, doing whatever they can to try and catch up to Method EU right now, who is at 65%, 1/3 of the health gone for Knight Captain Valyria here, doing well to manipulate the barrels around the room. That's really the name of the game, and you want to make sure you pre-move the boss to the corners away from where the barrels are. Else, if you need to get out, which they do right now, the boss tends to chain cast a lot. So you can see Mirror's just doing nothing right now in the corner. Just a bit of Crackling Jade Lightning, so losing a lot of damage just sitting on the outside there. So they need to make sure they pre-move just a bit, but at this point they are well ahead of Black Mamba right now, which is just cleaning up their fourth Reaping Wave. They have not even yet started on this non-tyrannical boss.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of a mismovement here from the boss, as both of the rogues were using their Cloak of Shadows to be able to just stand in the explosion and continue to damage the boss. Because, of course, all of those players have are melee DPS. Even Xaylia, the Resto Druid, needs to be in cat form to do damage. Of course, you can also cast Solar Blast, but it doesn't do as much as your cat abilities.
A bit of sloppiness coming in for Black Mamba as their Windwalker Monk does go down. They immediately use the Battle Res, which is going to have another charge available in just a few seconds here, actually. So there we go. It does take over. Method EU having 2 of those on the board, whilst we have seen that Black Mamba needed to use once. They only have 1 available to them. Finally, they're running in for Knight Captain Valeri, a boss that Method EU is about to kill right now. 3% left. After that, they only have 12% worth of trash, with just a few Wardens and Casters left before Korg is the final boss of the dungeon. There's one Warden that they're going to grab right away, along with the 2 Priests, and run right up the stairs. It looks like they're just going to either skip everything or pull everything and cannon it down. But it looks like Now's waiting in the middle, so they're actually just going to deal with everything right now.
Yeah, so we're 10 minutes into the dungeon. The Bloodlust just got back up for Method EU, and it also got back up for Black Mamba. Now, of course, both of those teams do want to use the Bloodlust on the very last boss on Korgus, as Method EU is dealing with this trash here. Now, they could just proc the Reaping and then just Shadow Melt most of the aggro off, basically, so they don't have to deal with it, and then just go to the boss. So they don't have to backtrack afterwards and go back to deal with the rest of it. But they are 98% now, so they probably have 1 more mob left somewhere that they're going to see, and now they only have the boss left to deal with their Bloodlust. And again, it's a 45 setting, so it really shouldn't be a big deal for Xaylia to heal this fight.
Should be no problem as the team gets in the corner here, as we see typical of these strats. Now, I'm not sure if they actually killed that last Warden. There was a Warden with a sliver of health left, so that might be the remaining 2% that they need. They might have just left it low and crowd controlled it on the side, moving up to the corners here. Now, this fight is largely dictated by how many doubles, of course, come in the fight, how many times of explosive, how many doubles or back-to-back explosive rounds the team does take. Usually makes the healer's life quite difficult, but we are in that fortified setting right now, so even with a few doubles, especially with a healer of Xaylia's caliber, it really shouldn't be too much concern. You can see him being as offensive still as possible in that cat form, moving just a bit out so that they don't clip each other, as Now has his back up to the wall there. Horrible view for tanks, I can tell you, but they are just chewing through this right now.
Yeah, Xaylia definitely playing very aggressively, as you can see, almost out DPS Fragments here at the very start on the opener. So very well done by Xaylia, just doing so much DPS here, 16k DPS coming out of the Resto Druid. Very good job, as Black Mamba just on their way to, actually they're on their way to the last boss here, so just 1 whole boss fight behind. Now, Method EU, they don't have their 11-minute time, as they mentioned is their best time, but they are really fast.
I learned long ago to never believe a word you say. So Korgus here at 30% right now, about to fall. It would require an absolutely disastrous situation, any cannon fire or anything finishing off the team, but we are fortified. We mentioned it a million times. This boss is really the scary part of the instance. Should it be on Tyrannical, but it's no problem for this team right now as they hit 20%.
Yeah, Method EU, as you mentioned, they had the Warden back there, which they have, there's the Warden just walking very, very slowly, which actually happens to be an advantage for the team. Now the incap is coming in from Maris to make sure that they don't have to deal with it right now, and once Korgus is dead, they can just finish up the mob, proc the 100% and be done with the dungeon. Now, very well done by them to make sure that they just min-max everything so perfectly, have the Warden on this like sliver of HP, so they don't waste any more seconds once this boss is done.
Korgus goes down, they turn around and sneeze on the Warden, ignoring the 5th wave of Reaping, and the Method EU, as they cheer in the background, Method EU, dominant performance here, just like we saw them in season play.